Hello, I'm Ron Squire. Welcome to highlights of the 2025 Formula SimRacing World Championship. The community vote for round 3 of the championship is the Australian Grand Prix taking place at the Albert Park Street Circuit in Melbourne. One of the few street circuits on the calendar, the Melbourne Grand Prix circuit runs clockwise around the Albert Park Lake and composes of sweeping corners and chicanes running across a very flat track. The great place for the race, as this place is aptly named, it is still a tough test for brakes and driving ability, as there's little room for error around the tight confines of Albert Park. Taking their pole position for the second time this season is Ron Squire, who had a major sigh of relief in qualifying as Mark Schluter made a major mistake at the end of his last qualifying lap. The Geo team driver had to settle for second, while Sander Callis had an amazing turn of pace in qualifying for third, besting both Fournier and Sukes. Janis Braxok makes his return to the World Championship, making it 5 optimal eSports cars on the grid, but can only make 6 ahead of the GOT drivers of Patrick Hanko, Cosmo Pachito in his first race of the season, and a returning Christian Pascal. Tom Oldenberger struggled in qualifying but doesn't enough to make the top 10. Istvan Zingel and Cedric Bill can only contend with 11th and 12th in qualifying, and Mirko Mancini managed to hold off a massive effort from Lucas Viscott for 13th. George Zalgianis had a bad session to line up 16th, Andrei Boyatovsky replaces Yasser Nathaniel for this round to line up 17th, and Squire Nation Esports make their debut on the grid with Canadian Zach Chasen in 18th and Brazilian Douglas Simonelli in 19th. To the race start, both Machete and Schluter make a lightning start off the line, with Schluter trying to hold on to the optimal driver. As the field goes into turn 1, Tom Oldenberger spins behind Cedric Bill as they both go off and off-roading. Luckily, no damage was made and everyone made it cleanly through. Further up the field, Schluter struggles to hold on to second place, but unfortunately for the German, it only took half a lap for Fournier to ease past the Geo team driver. At the end of the opening lap, Machete leads from Fournier, Schluter, Callis, Sukes, Hanko, Braxok, Pachito, Single and Oldenberger. It was the first race of the season for Cosmo Pachito, and the American is showing he's lost none of his pace, despite not finding a clear way past Istvan Zingel for 8th. On lap 3 near the back, the battle is hotted up between the Geo team driver Lando Narza and Ground Effects Matt Tucson, with the Hungarian and Brit going toe-to-toe for 17th. The battle was short-lived as Tucson goes onto the grass as Marza storms ahead and even overtakes Zalgianis on the next lap as the Greek driver outbrakes himself at turn 1 and going onto the gravel trap. Then 4 laps later, both Mazda and Zalgianis take their battle up the field as they overtake both envy conquests of Boratovsky and Viscott with minimum effort, despite Viscott also going off at turn 1. Throughout the next couple of laps, Patrick Hanko has been slowly reeling in Zolk Sukes in his pursuit for 5th place. But sadly for the Slovakian, that's all as good as it can get, as on lap 10, the Geo team driver overcooked it at turn 3, going off onto the gravel trap, losing the battle for good. The debuting Squire Nation Esports held their own at the back, but due to technical issues, both cars retired by the end of lap 11. As the field enters lap 15 and the mediums going in for their first stops of the race, there is no proper shuffling of the order. Ron Machete has a lead of at least 4 seconds from Jeffrey Fournier, as Mark Schluter is struggling to hold on to the optimal eSports pair. Sander Callis is behind, ensuring the Geo team driver is not out of his sights whilst keeping Zolk Sukes at bay. Patrick Hanko, who had his off-roading earlier, does his best to hold off Janis Braxok. Cosmo Pachito is having a decent race in 8th. Tom Oldenberger is having a slightly difficult race in 9th, while Christian Pascal rounds out the top 10. Lap 18 sees Patrick Hanko and Cosmo Pachito coming in for their first stops for both 6th and 9th place. But their pit boxes were too close, meaning that Hanko and Pachito had a close moment at the end of the pit lane as Hanko dives out before Pachito can dive in. The Slovakian re-emerges in 11th, whilst the American comes out in 13th. 1 lap later, as Jeffrey Fournier stood to get some fresh rubber, giving Schluter some temporary respite in his pursuit of Machete. The Frenchman comes out just behind Cedric Bill in 9th, before re-overtaking the Geo team driver for 8th at turn 3. The next lap is Ron Machete's turn, with Mark Schluter taking the lead for the first time in the race. Machete emerges in 7th, just ahead of Jeffrey Fournier, but it would be 3 laps before Schluter makes his own stop with Sander Callis right behind him. But unfortunately for the German, the undercut did not work, as Zolk Sukes takes the lead with Janis Braxok in 2nd. Ron Machete also passes pit lane in 3rd, with Schluter rejoining in 6th, behind Pascal and Fournier. Machete would ultimately retake the lead by lap 25, as Zolk Sukes pits in on lap 23 and Janis Braxok pits a lap later on lap 24. Both Sukes and Braxok are now in 7th and 8th by the time lap 25 rolls around, with both optimal eSports drivers on mediums, and then with Christian Pascal pitting in for the top 3 on lap 26, Mark Schluter was back in the hunt. With Schluter now on fresh mediums and 48 on less fresh hards, the German is making ground on the Frenchman for the last 5 laps. It will be on lap 27 that Schluter makes his move before the sweeping turns 11 and 12, passing 48 with ease. The next lap it will be vice versa for their teammates, as in the middle of the pack, Istvan Zingel, who's been battling Cedric Bill for the last couple of laps, makes his move at turn 1, taking 12th place and sets his sights on Mancini. The move then happened on lap 31 and Zingel creates enough pace behind the Valley eSports owner and takes him into turn 1 with Bill, but then they both touch and with no room to go, Mancini goes off onto the grass with no alternative but to surrender 11th to the Hungarian. Lap 38 and Schluter makes his second stop in an attempt to once again try and undercut on Machete. The German emerges in 7th place behind Zooks. But again the undercut did not work as Machete pits in on lap 41 with 48 taking the lead ahead of Callas. Machete comes out in 3rd right in front of Patrick Hanko, who is embroiled in a battle with Jas Braxok. Hanko does have a look at Machete at turn 3, but that's all the Slovakian could do as the German gives him no opportunity for a pass. Hanko would pit in from 4th on lap 42, breaking off from the battle from the two optimal drivers. He rejoins just in front of Zolk Suks. The battle between the two intensifies at turn 3 as both cars touch. It nearly came to a head later on in the lap as Hanko forces Zuks near the wall and the Hungarian had to go off-road to avoid being taken out altogether as he loses ground to the Slovakian. As the field begins to make their final stops on lap 43, a great portion of the low half begins to put on softs in a bid to close up to the top 10. Callas takes the lead from 48 and Braxok dives in for the pits. The lead will only last a lap as the Estonian pits in on lap 44, dropping down to 5th behind 48, who makes a classy and clean overtake on Oldenmenger for 3rd. The battle for 7th continues between Hanko and Zooks, with the Hungarian pushing himself to the limit and beyond following his early excursion, especially when the Slovakian struggles to find a way past Oldenmenger. But sadly, it all came undone for both Hanko and Zooks, as 10 laps from the end, both drivers were side by side before the turn 11-12 complex, with Hanko taking the inside of turn 11 when with no room to go. Zooks and Hanko made contact at turn 12 with both cars going off the gravel trap. Significant damage was made, but with Hanko able to continue with 3 wheels back to the pits, Zooks suffered severe rear damage, leaving the frustrated Hungarian with no choice but becoming the 3rd retirement of the race. As the field goes into the closing stages of the race, the final order is starting becoming more and more apparent. River Machete has built a big enough pace for Mark Schluter to take the race all the way to the finish line. Jeffrey Fournier, despite losing the top 2 battle, has a sustainable gap between himself and Sander Callas to keep hold of 3rd. Jas Braxok on his return is having a decent race to hold on to 5th, 10 seconds from Tom Oldenmenger. Cosmo Buscito and Christian Pascal is holding off each other's backs in 7th and 8th. Istvan Zingel is having a quiet but good race at 9th, whilst Mirko Mancini is doing his best to hold off Cedric Bill for 10th, despite the Geo team driver recently having pitted for softs. The Frenchman is trying his best to do whatever it takes to break into the top 10, but Mancini is making Bill's life absolutely difficult as the race goes into the final laps. Bill does have the pace, but he's been able to put his DRS, and with this difficulty, Mancini can simply take 10th all the way home. Taking his first win of the season, River Machete finally puts behind his Bahrain and Malaysia woes to take the top step on the podium and the lead in the Owen Magogi Cup. It's a struggle performance for Mark Schluter, but aces the car to take himself to 2nd, and Jeffrey Fournier puts in another brilliant race to take his 2nd podium of the season. Sander Callas once again becomes the dark horse of the pack as he finishes 4th, just 4 seconds ahead of the returning Jas Braxok. Tom Oldenmenger turned around his qualifying form to finish 6th, whilst the Geo team pair of Christian Pascal and Cosmo Buscito take 7th and 8th, ahead of Istvan Zingel in 9th and Mirko Mancini rounding out the top 10. So after 3 rounds, the Drivers' Championship standings sees Machete leap up to 2nd and behind Schluter, who is still leading by 28 points. Oldenmenger still holds on to 3rd by just 1 point ahead of both Fournier and Callas. Zolksuk's form has taken a dive in Australia, but is still 10 points ahead of Patrick Hanko in 7th. George Zalgianis and Mirko Mancini tie up 8th, while Istvan Zingel makes it into the top 10 for the first time this season. In the constructor standings, despite extra points for Ottawa eSports, CMT Go Team still lead by 10 points. Vega Valley eSports still hold on to 3rd despite mounting pressure from ground effect with all 3 cars in their points today, and MV Conquest get 1 extra point courtesy of Lucas Viscott, while Squire Nation eSports hope to sort out any issues before the next round. The next race is in 3 weeks' time at the Red Bull Ring near Spielberg for the Austrian Grand Prix on Sunday the 10th of August. And you can watch that race live as it happens right here on our YouTube channel. Qualifying begins at 8:30 PM GMT, with the race starting at 8:45 PM GMT. In the meantime, you can join in on our forums at formula-simracing.net, as well as our Discord server for our up-to-date information and join in on the community. The links are in the description below, and you can check out our socials on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I'm Ron Squire, and join us for the next round of the 2025 Formula Sim Racing World Championship.